Georgia is one of the oldest states in America. It's been around since the original 13 colonies. Savannah, Atlanta, Augusta, those are the names everyone knows. But scattered across the state's backroads, hidden in national forests and buried under lakes, there are hundreds of towns that once had newspapers, post offices, factories, and thousands of residents. Towns that simply vanished. Some of them drowned, some of them burned. One of them was home to America's first gold rush before California even entered the picture, and at least one was erased on purpose, buried under millions of gallons of water with its buildings, roads, and cemeteries still sitting at the bottom. These are 13 of the weirdest ghost towns in Georgia. By the time we get to number 1, you're going to wonder how you've never heard of any of them. Let's start the countdown. If you enjoy uncovering places' history, try to erase. Like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you think. Number 13, Mallory. About 10 minutes east of Madison, Georgia, there is a historical marker sitting in front of a little roadside graveyard. You would drive right past it if you were not looking. But that marker tells the story of a town that once had 2,000 residents, a general store, cotton gins, a grist mill, and rows of homes stretching along the dirt road. The town of Mallory was built by the Mallory family, who were the major landowners in the area. For decades, it functioned like any other small southern town. By the early 1900s, the people were gone. The economy dried up, the younger generation left for cities, and the town slowly emptied out. What is wild is that some of the old plantation houses are still standing. Deep in the trees off the back roads near Madison, you can find Greek Revival architecture from the 1820s and the 1840s, with columns crumbling and porches sagging into the ground. Nobody lives there. Nobody maintains them. They are just rotting in place. Number 12, Powellton. Over in Hancock County, about 2 hours east of Atlanta, the remains of Powellton still sit. The strangest thing about Powellton is not that it is abandoned. It is that its Methodist church from the 1830s still stands, perfectly intact, in the middle of nowhere. Powellton was a cotton town. It had stores, homes, a post office, all the things a small Georgia community needed. Then the railroad came through the county, and it did not come through Powellton. It went somewhere else instead. That single decision was a death sentence. Businesses relocated to be near the train line. When the boll weevil destroyed the cotton crops in the early 1900s, whatever was left of Powellton fell apart. Today, that old white church stands alone in a field surrounded by nothing. It is one of the eeriest sights in rural Georgia, a building that outlived every single person and business that once surrounded it. Number 11, Jacksonboro. In Screven County, down in the southeast corner of the state, you'll find Jacksonboro, or what's left of it. This was once a county seat, a town that mattered, with inns and stores serving travelers and traders moving through central Georgia. But when the railroads bypassed it in the mid-1800s, routing commerce through nearby communities, instead, Jacksonboro started dying, and it never recovered. If you can find the old road that leads to the site today, you'll see decaying houses with sagging porches and shattered windows. Foundation outlines mark where other buildings once stood before they collapsed entirely. The forest has moved in from all sides, wrapping around what is left like it is trying to swallow the whole place. Local historians occasionally lead tours through the site, sharing stories passed down through generations. But for the most part, Jacksonboro sits in silence, slowly being absorbed back into the Georgia lowlands. Number 10, High Falls. In Monroe County, about an hour south of Atlanta, the Towaliga River drops over a rocky ledge and crashes into a pool below. It is gorgeous. People come to High Falls State Park to hike, to camp, and to take photos of the waterfall. But here is what they do not realize. They are walking through a ghost town. Before it was a park, High Falls was a textile mill community, a factory town built right alongside the waterfall, using the river's power to run the looms. The town supported a general store, homes, and the kind of small community that revolved entirely around one employer. Foundation lines and scattered brick are mixed in with the hiking trails now. You can see where the streets used to be, where the mill building stood, and where workers lived in company housing along the riverbank. When the textile industry went south, so did High Falls. The mill closed, the workers moved on, and the buildings began to fall apart. Eventually, the state turned the whole area into a park. The waterfall gets all the attention, and it should. It is one of the prettiest spots in Middle Georgia, but the real story is in the ruins, hiding in the tree line just a few dozen yards from the falls. Most visitors walk right past them without a second thought. Number 9. Barnett Shoals. Just downstream from Athens, where the University of Georgia draws tens of thousands of students every year, the Oconee River curls around a spot where a thread mill once turned water power into wages. Barnett Shoals was never a big town. It was a working community built around the mill. Families lived there, raised kids there, and walked to work at the factory every morning. The mill provided everything, and when the mill closed, the reason for Barnett Shoals to exist disappeared with it. Today you can find stone foundations covered in lichen, the remnants of a dam, and scattered brick poking out of the underbrush along the riverbank. Kayakers paddle right past the site without knowing it is there. The river has done most of the demolition work, washing away a little more of the town's footprint with every flood season. Barnett Shoals didn't die dramatically. It just faded, like morning mist burning off the Oconee. Number 8. New Ebenezer. This is where things start getting strange. In the 1730s, a group of Salzburger Protestants fled religious persecution in Austria and crossed the Atlantic Ocean, looking for a place where they could practice their faith without being thrown in prison. They landed in Georgia, and the colonial government, under James Oglethorpe himself, gave them land in what is now Effingham County. They called their settlement Ebenezer, a biblical name meaning stone of help. Their first attempt at building a town failed miserably. The soil was terrible, mosquitoes carried disease through the settlement, and the swampy conditions made farming nearly impossible. So they petitioned Oglethorpe, packed up everything, and relocated a few miles away to higher ground. They called the new site New Ebenezer, and this time they were determined to make it work. And for a while, it actually did. They built homes, farms, a silk production operation, and a church called Jerusalem Lutheran. The congregation was formally established in the 1730s, and here is the thing that will stop you in your tracks. That congregation is still active today, still holding services. That makes it one of the oldest continuously operating congregations in the entire United States, nearly 3 centuries of unbroken worship. But the town itself did not survive. By the mid-1800s, harsh conditions and better opportunities elsewhere pulled people away. Most of the Salzburgers merged with nearby communities or moved up to Savannah. New Ebenezer emptied out, and the buildings crumbled one by one. But that church stands. Jerusalem Lutheran still stands, still open. It is a living, breathing piece of the 1730s, surrounded by the remains of everything that died around it. Number 7. Wrightsboro. In McDuffie County, near the town of Thompson, there is a cemetery with graves dating back to the Revolutionary War. Next to it stands a small white church built around 1810. And that is it. That is all that remains of the southernmost Quaker settlement in colonial America. In 1768, a group of about 40 Quaker families moved down from North Carolina because they could not stand the taxes and oppression under British colonial governors. They were given 40,000 acres on the Georgia frontier and built a community called Wrightsboro, named after Royal Governor James Wright. By 1775, more than 60 families lived in the town, with another 200 families in the surrounding township. They had homes, grist mills, a meeting house, a newspaper called the Village Wreath, and even an inn. But the Quakers had a problem with Georgia. They banned slavery in their community in 1774, which put them at odds with the cotton-based economy growing around them. The Revolutionary War brought violence to their doorstep. Nearly 35 murders occurred in the area during a wave of banditry in 1781. For a community committed to pacifism, this was unbearable. By the early 1800s, Most of the Quakers had packed up and migrated north to Ohio and Indiana. The non-Quaker residents who stayed behind slowly dwindled over the decades. By 1920, Wrightsboro was a ghost town. Today, the old rock house built by Thomas Ansley around 1785 still stands on a quiet dirt road nearby. It is the oldest stone residence in Georgia, and it recently earned a spot on Georgia's 2025 Places in Peril list. It will not be standing forever. Number 6, Griswoldville. 10 miles east of Macon, at a quiet crossroads next to some old train tracks, there is not much to look at. A few historical markers and some farmland. That is about it. But in the 1850s, this was one of the first factory towns in the entire South. Samuel Griswold, a Connecticut native who moved to Georgia, built a massive industrial complex here. Cotton gin factories, a sawmill, a grist mill, a brick factory, and a soap and candle operation. He built a 3-story, 24-room mansion for himself, a church, and 60 cottages for workers. When the Civil War broke out, Griswold converted his cotton gin factory into a pistol factory. His workers started manufacturing copies of the Colt Navy revolver for the Confederate Army. They produced about 3,500 of them, more than any other manufacturer in the Confederacy. Collectors today call them brass frame Confederate Colts, and they are worth a fortune. But Griswoldville's pistol factory made it a target. On November 20th, 1864, during Sherman's march to the sea, Union cavalry rode into town and burned the factory, the depot, and most of the surrounding buildings to the ground. 2 days later came the tragedy. Georgia militia, mostly made up of old men and boys as young as 14, marched into the smoking ruins and stumbled into battle-hardened Union infantry dug in behind a creek. The Georgians charged across an open field 7 times. They suffered around 650 casualties out of 2,300 men. A Union colonel wrote about finding a 14-year-old boy with broken limbs on the battlefield. Lying next to him, dead, were his father, 2 brothers, and an uncle. The officer called it a harvest of death and wrote that he hoped he would never have to shoot at such men again. Griswoldville never recovered. Today, virtually nothing remains of Samuel Griswold's company town. If you are finding this useful, hit subscribe. I cover forgotten places and dark history every week. Now let us talk about the top 5. Number 5, Sunbury. On the coast of Georgia, in Liberty County, there's a bluff overlooking the Medway River where Spanish moss hangs from live oak trees and the marsh stretches out in every direction. It's beautiful, it's peaceful, and it's a graveyard of an entire city. In the 1770s, Sunbury was the second largest town in the colony of Georgia. It had nearly 1,000 residents, 5 working wharves, a shipyard, a manufacturing center, a famous academy run by a friend of George Washington, and a commercial port that genuinely rivaled Savannah. The town was originally planned with 496 lots arranged around 3 public squares, modeled after Savannah's famous square system. Ocean-going ships left Sunbury carrying timber, rice, corn, and indigo to ports across the Atlantic. The famous naturalist William Bartram stopped in Sunbury in 1773 on his way to Florida and described it as a town of about 100 neatly built houses with pleasant piazzas. It was a place of wealth, ambition, and real influence in colonial Georgia. During the American Revolution, the colonists at Sunbury were fierce patriots. When British forces sailed up and demanded they surrender nearby Fort Morris, Colonel John McIntosh sent back a reply that became legendary. Just 2 words that captured the defiance of the entire community. But the British came back with a larger force and took the town in January 1779. George Walton, one of the actual signers of the Declaration of Independence, was held as a prisoner of war at Sunbury after being wounded and captured during the fall of Savannah. He was eventually exchanged, but the damage to Sunbury was done. The British occupation drove out the residents, and the town never bounced back. After the war ended, Sunbury tried to rebuild, but it was fighting against gravity. The county seat moved to Riceboro in the 1790s. Hurricanes in 1804 and 1824 hammered what was left. Yellow fever killed more residents, and Savannah absorbed all the remaining trade, leaving Sunbury with nothing. By the mid-1800s, Sunbury was a ghost town. Union troops burned its Baptist church during Sherman's march to the sea, destroying one of the last standing structures. Today, not a single building from the original town remains. All that's left is a cemetery with worn and tilting headstones, the earthworks at Fort Moore State Historic Site, and the silence of a place that once dreamed of being Georgia's greatest port. Number 4. Auraria. This might be the weirdest origin story of any ghost town in America. In 1828, someone walking along Finley Ridge in what is now Lumpkin County kicked a rock. Inside it was full of gold. That discovery kicked off the first major gold rush in American history, a full 20 years before the California Gold Rush. Thousands of prospectors flooded into the North Georgia mountains onto land that still legally belonged to the Cherokee Nation. The Cherokee called it the Great Intrusion. President Andrew Jackson was already pushing for Indian removal, and the discovery of gold made the situation even worse. The land was not technically open for settlement, but that did not stop anyone. A boom town exploded into existence along the ridge between the Chestatee and Etowah rivers. A man named William Dean built the first cabin in the summer of 1832, and within 6 months, the town had 100 houses, 20 stores, 15 law offices, and several taverns. It was called Knucklesville at first, after Nathaniel Knuckles, who opened a tavern and hotel. Then it was renamed Auraria, from the Latin word for gold. The population of Lumpkin County hit 10,000, with the town itself housing thousands, and this was not some scraggly mining camp. Vice President John C. Calhoun personally owned a gold mine in the area and would stay at the local hotel for 2 weeks at a time, overseeing his operation. A newspaper called the Western Herald began publication in 1833. Stagecoaches ran routes to Augusta and beyond. Churches, confectionaries, and a saying lab and a Baptist congregation all opened up. Drovers brought hogs from Tennessee and wild turkeys to the mining camps to feed the population. But Auraria's fall was just as fast as its rise. When the county needed a seat of government, judges chose a site 5 miles away called Dahlonega instead. The newspaper relocated, the businesses followed, and when the government decided to build a United States mint for gold coinage, they put that in Dahlonega too. The plans were literally drawn up in a hotel dining room in Auraria, but the mint went to the rival town. That must have stung. By 1840, the easy gold was gone, but the final blow came in 1849, when gold was discovered in California. Within days of the news reaching Georgia, Auraria's population collapsed from over 4,000 to less than 300. The miners packed up and headed west so fast that the town emptied out almost overnight. Georgia's gold expert, Matthew Stevenson, climbed the steps of the Dahlonega courthouse and begged the remaining miners to stay, shouting that there were still millions to be found in the Georgia hills. That desperate plea is widely believed to be the origin of the famous phrase, "There's gold in them thar hills." But nobody listened. And here is the twist that ties this whole story together. The Russell brothers, William, Levi, and Oliver, who had grown up in Auraria, traveled all the way to Colorado Territory in 1858. They found gold on the banks of Cherry Creek and named their new settlement Auraria, after the Georgia town they had left behind. The Colorado settlement later merged with the community across the creek. The combined town took a different name. They called it Denver. So the ghost town in the Georgia mountains is the direct ancestor of one of the biggest cities in the American West. Today, Auraria has about 350 residents. The old general store called Woody's, an abandoned bank building covered in kudzu, and a few crumbling foundations are all that is left of what was once the center of American gold fever. Number 3. Skull Shoals. Deep in the Oconee National Forest, down a sandy road in Greene County, there is a place that has been called the creepiest ghost town in Georgia, and honestly, it earns the title. Skull Shoals began as a frontier village around 1784, right along the Oconee River. Over the decades, it grew into a serious industrial town. It was home to Georgia's first paper mill, along with sawmills, grist mills, and eventually a massive 4-story brick textile mill that employed over 600 workers running 4,000 spindles. But the Oconee River giveth, and the Oconee River taketh away. In 1887, a catastrophic flood tore through Skull Shoals. The water rose higher than anyone had ever seen. Homes collapsed underwater. The town's toll bridge broke free and floated downstream. Silt and mud covered everything. The mills were destroyed, and the economic engine of the entire community was gone in a matter of hours. Nobody rebuilt. The last residents eventually left, and by 1949, the ruins were absorbed into the Oconee National Forest. Today, crumbling brick walls, old millstones, and an arched stone bridge that goes nowhere are slowly being swallowed by the forest. The name itself is unsettling. No one knows for certain where Skull came from, but one theory points to Native American burial grounds nearby. 2 Lamar Indian mounds dating back to 1250 are located close to the site. Visitors report shadowy figures moving between the ruins, footsteps in empty clearings, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. Whether you believe in that sort of thing or not, walking through the remains of Skull Shoals on a foggy morning will make you question your own skepticism. And here is a historical footnote that adds another layer. Before it died, Skull Shoals was home to a young man named Adam D. Williams. He later became the Reverend of Atlanta's Ebenezer Baptist Church, and his grandson was Martin Luther King Jr. Number 2, Oscarville. This is the one that changes the mood of this whole video. In northeastern Forsyth County, Georgia, a black community called Oscarville was established during Reconstruction after the Civil War. It was an agricultural town, and by the early 1900s, it was thriving. Black families owned farmland, ran businesses, operated churches and schools. Many of the residents had been freed from slavery after fighting in the Civil War, and they had built something real. About 1,100 black residents called Forsyth County home, with Oscarville as one of their main communities. Then, in September 1912, everything came apart. After allegations against several black men, racial tensions that had been simmering since the 1906 Atlanta race riots exploded into violence. A black preacher named Grant Smith appealed to the sheriff to release 5 men who had been arrested, arguing there was not enough evidence. A white mob dragged Smith to the courthouse steps and horse-whipped him until he was barely alive. A young black man named Rob Edwards was pulled from the county jail and lynched in downtown Cumming. Then a white terrorist group calling themselves the Night Riders went door to door across Forsyth County, demanding that every black person leave. They gave families 24 hours. When some refused, the Night Riders shot into their houses, set their churches on fire, killed their animals, and burned their homes to the ground. Over the course of a few months, approximately 1,100 black residents, roughly 98% of Forsyth County's entire black population, were driven from their homes and land. Property deeds that had belonged to black families for decades were seized by white neighbors without any bill of sale or transfer. The community that had taken a generation to build was destroyed in weeks. Oscarville became a ghost town. Forsyth County remained essentially all white for the next 70 years into the 1980s. But the story does not end there. In the 1950s, the federal government built Buford Dam and created Lake Lanier, a massive reservoir covering nearly 58 square miles. The rising water swallowed several communities, including what was left of Oscarville. Buildings, roads, and cemeteries that were too expensive to demolish were left in place and flooded. The lake was named after Sidney Lanier, a white Confederate poet. To this day, the foundations of Oscarville sit at the bottom of Lake Lanier. Divers occasionally spot rooftops and debris in the murky water. The stadium seating from the old Looper Speedway emerges from the surface during droughts, like a ghost rising from the deep. Several cemeteries were never properly relocated and remain submerged. Since the lake was filled in 1956 An estimated 700 people have died in its waters. Boating accidents, drownings, and unexplained incidents have given Lake Lanier a reputation as one of the most dangerous and allegedly haunted bodies of water in the South. In 1958, two women drove off a bridge into the lake. One body was not found for 31 years, and she was still in the car. Locals report seeing a woman in a blue dress near the water's edge. Whether the hauntings are real or not, the history underneath that lake is undeniable. And a 2016 book called Blood at the Root brought much of this story into the national conversation for the first time. Number 1. The town that burned itself. We are going back to Auraria for the final entry because the strangest chapter of Georgia's first gold rush town has not been told yet. And honestly, this might be the wildest story on this entire list. After the California gold rush emptied out Auraria, the men who remained wanted to head west. They wanted to chase the next strike, the next opportunity, the next pile of gold waiting to be pulled out of the ground. There was nothing left for them in Georgia. The easy gold was gone. The businesses had closed. The town was dying, but the women did not want to go. They wanted to stay and build something lasting. They organized a meeting at the local Baptist church to discuss how they could create manufacturing jobs, improve the quality of life, and turn Auraria into a real community that did not depend on gold to survive. They had a plan. They had ideas. They were ready to fight for the town. While the women were inside the church having that meeting, the men made a decision of their own. They loaded up the wagons with furniture, clothes, and everything they could carry. While their wives and mothers and daughters sat in those church pews talking about the future, the men set fire to the houses, every single one along the road, one after another, flames rising into the Georgia sky. When the women walked out of the church that evening, they looked down the road in both directions and saw smoke rising from every home they had ever known. Their houses were gone. Their belongings that had not been loaded onto wagons were ash. The men had burned the town to the ground to force their families to leave for the western gold fields. That road, the one that was lined with the charred remains of houses that night, is still called Burnt Stand Road today. You can drive on it. If you take Highway 400 north through Lumpkin County, you will see the sign right there on the roadside. A permanent reminder carved into the Georgia highway system of the night a town decided to destroy itself rather than survive without gold. And that is it. 13 ghost towns in Georgia, each one stranger than the last. From drowned cities to self-immolating boom towns, from Quaker pacifists who could not live with slavery to Confederate pistol factories burned during Sherman's march, the Peach State is hiding more forgotten history in its backroads, forests, and lake beds than you would ever imagine. Every one of these places was somebody's home, somebody's neighborhood, somebody's whole world, and now they are just headstones, foundations, and stories waiting for someone to tell them. If stories like these are your thing, the video on screen right now goes even deeper into America's most disturbing abandoned places. Click it. You will not regret it.